Hi everyone, this is Sim. Welcome to North and South Podcasts. Hope you're all well. I'm off at the moment because it's kind of Easter holiday time kind of thing going on. So having a great time. And it's a real honour today to invite Caitlin onto the podcast. Caitlin came to a Hope Street meeting, which is the CIC charity in Ormskirk, a wellbeing charity that I always speak to and I put in the podcast notes. And I always speak of and share information about. So check those out if you live in the Ormskirk area. We also are mutual friends of Debs, who's going to be coming on soon. And Debs is a volunteer at Hope Street too, and she has been through a lot. She's got a very interesting story. So we both know Debs. We've both been to Hope Street. And I've been meaning to speak to someone like Caitlin for a while, who has not only got her own wellbeing journey to talk about, but she actually studies wellbeing. And it's an expanding field at the moment as mental health discussion and well-being discussion becomes more mainstream, if you like. But we've still got a long way to go. So, Caitlin, thank you very much for coming on. How are you today?
No, it's my pleasure. I'm good today, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, yeah, I'm good. I got up this morning, did a little exercise workout online, and I don't know if anyone's heard of Bowflex 5-minute workouts online, but you can do other workouts, but they do little 5 or 6 minute cardio workouts, and I find them really helpful in the morning just to wake me up and get the positivity pumping, as it were. So
Would
yeah, I
never
did
be
that this
me.
morning.
I'm not a get up and go kind of person. I'm definitely a stay in bed for half an hour and then I'll peel myself out of bed and get going.
Yeah. To be honest with you, though, when I was your age, I think I was very much the same. But as you get a bit older, you just tend to wake up earlier. It's a
Yeah.
strange thing. Tell me about your studies then and what you are doing as part of that.
So currently I'm in my third year of university at Edge Hill University in Ormskirk, and I'm studying child and adolescent mental health and wellbeing. So it's all around the developing mental health of children and how that can be impacted by like predisposed vulnerability. So if they have a disability or they're exposed to abuse in their early years, or something that we've touched on recently is about fetal alcohol syndrome and how that progresses children's vulnerabilities in later life. And it's just really interesting because myself, I've got a younger sister that's got disabilities. So I find it really interesting to learn all about stuff like that.
Good. So it's got a family importance for you as well as,
Yeah.
as something that helps you too. And I know
Yeah.
schools. I know in Manchester, Andy Burnham, the Metro Mayor, is now trying to get a counsellor or someone who's responsible just for well-being in every school. And I know that CAMS, which is the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, sometimes you can wait a long time to get a
Yeah.
referral to CAMS. We've had the impact of COVID on young people in schools. We've also got this seeming increase in mental health problems within young people. And again, some people say, oh, there's genetic factors, there's the environmental factors. But I certainly have seen in the classroom as a teacher on the front line, there seems to be more difficulty with mental health and well-being presenting. And I think that seems to be reflected in university studies like your own, which is looking at that because it's a big field, isn't it? Do you think, what are your experiences of COVID as someone who's come through education over the last few years, even albeit higher education? Have you got any feelings about how COVID's impacted on you or people more generally?
Um, Personally, because during COVID, I had to what was called shield. So I wasn't, you got like your daily walk and stuff like that. I wasn't allowed most of that. So my studies actually quite dropped quite a lot due to my own mental health there. But I didn't feel like it was consistent at all. So some of my A levels, because that's when COVID hit when I was doing my A level exams, some of my A levels were still had to sit in exam conditions as if we'd still learnt the entire like scheme of work. And then others, I was allowed to see the entire paper that I would be sitting for weeks before, be able to revise everything that was going to be on the exam and then sit the exam. So it was just all over the place on how to actually prepare. I don't think it was very consistent. But at the same time, learning over the internet was very strange. It didn't feel as connected as it would in a classroom.
Yeah, I taught online in from January to March 2021. And the first lockdown in 2020, we set work on the computers for the students to do at home. And I would call certain vulnerable students. So there was one girl who had autism, and she got 2 phone calls a week from me, and I would talk to her mum, then her, and then others I would call as well. But even in what you might call an academic household, it was quite hard to keep people going, young people going. But if you are in a house where poor internet coverage, or maybe someone who hasn't got broadband and, you know, lacking cultural capital, etc., or a garden even, I go to see Everton at home sometimes, and a lot of the streets near Everton's ground, they're just like concrete, no trees, no parks nearby. And I remember going to the game I think it was just after the first lockdown, and thinking, goodness, I wouldn't have liked to have lived around here during those COVID lockdowns, because it's very hard to get out and do stuff and access nature. But I certainly found that teaching online in the winter when it was dark and cold, I really struggled with that. And I felt like it had a big impact on me. And the young people's behaviour on the front line in schools, I've noticed, really deteriorated. And problems started to present, particularly mobile phone reliance and usage. Things like that started to present far more actively. But I think the COVID thing, it must have been like this during after World War II, where you've had a lot of young people who haven't been in schools for a few years, maybe during an evacuation, you know, that kind of stuff going on. But it certainly wasn't an easy time for me, and I think it certainly wasn't an easy time for a lot of people. And I don't think we're even close to understanding the full implications of COVID.
Oh, not at all. Definitely being just in one room. Well, I in a house with the same 4 walls every single day, seeing the same people every single day. It just gets so repetitive, and you might love the people you're isolating with, but this same monotonous sort of continuation, after a while, it gets boring, and then you're just like, well, I don't want to do it anymore. What's the point in getting up and going when I actually can't go anywhere, and I'm just doing the same thing I did yesterday? Life becomes boring, and people really struggled in lockdown.
Yeah, definitely. And putting aside even those people who struggled financially, I know some jobs there was, you know, economic support, and some people's pay continued. In other environments, that wasn't the case. Even putting aside those kinds of issues, if you like, the day-to-day monotony, because the first one in 2020, the weather was, I've never known weather like it was beautiful.
I know,
for
it was stunning, wasn't it? Yeah.
But that second one, January to March, the second full one, that really impacted me, I think, really impacted me. And being in a room trying to teach on a computer and trying to keep so many people going, and the build-up of admin and bureaucracy. I mean, I worked in a good school that were like speaking to staff and trying to make things better, which isn't always the case for a lot of employers, but it was a difficult time. And I think COVID has actually put well-being and mental health far more up the agenda, because of people being impacted by COVID, but also I think having time to realise things about themselves. I think there's been a big increase in referrals for like ADHD diagnosis, where people maybe realise things about themselves under lockdown and things like that, which have had a big impact too. So were you shielding because you needed to protect your sister? Was that why you were shielding?
No, I that was a reason. My sister was also shielding, but no, I was shielding for my own health problems. So when I was younger, I have Crohn's social ulcerative colitis, which is like a autoimmune disease and stuff. So if I had got COVID, it could have been like life-threatening. It was really severe. So I sort of shielded for that reason, for my own protection.
I was in a similar boat. I've got a genetic illness, Behçet's disease, which is similar to Crohn's, and I was shielding, but I actually applied for, you know, people to do shopping for me for the first few months, and there was like strangers coming to my door with shopping, you know, that we'd arranged online. I think there was a lot of really good stuff from people during COVID as well. Like you sometimes forget how people rallied and came together. And that was quite heartening. But certainly the first one, where there was a lot more kind of damage to the lungs and the throat that seemed to be a problem. I think some of the later COVID variants affected more the upper throat and the nose, etc.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of people who, because we didn't have enough, what were they called, ventilators or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of people were at risk if they were vulnerable. And I think that added to the kind of fear for me, as well as having like elderly parents and stuff. Although statistically things were on your side, even in those cases, dude, if you got it and it was bad, it could be very, very dangerous, couldn't it?
Yeah.
I think also the long COVID thing as well, when that started to become apparent, because the more times people get COVID now, I mean, I might have had it, I think, definitely 2, but maybe 3 or 4 times. You expose yourself to long COVID more, and that can have long-term implications on health as well. So again, they're just such grey areas. It's hard to know what's what exactly, isn't it?
Well, I did get COVID once, but thankfully it wasn't anything. I must have caught like such a mild version of it. I only started, like, I got a very runny nose and I was just sneezing a lot, so it wasn't. But obviously on the little tests it came up positive. But I swear by it, I was like, no, I've never had it. Can't have it. I'm only sneezing. I never coughed once or anything like that. I just didn't have the typical symptoms, which made it even more frustrating because I was like, I don't feel ill. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. And then you wonder whether you've got it or it's just something that's similar to it. And I mean, I was ill for a month before Christmas this year and really struggling to go into work. I'm sure I had COVID, but again, there's long-term impacts, aren't there, that we're only just finding out about. So as part of your studies, are you doing a dissertation? You're in your final year now. Is there a particular thing that you focused on for your dissertation?
So at the moment, yes, I am doing my dissertation. It is due in about 2 weeks, I think. And I am doing it on the psychological impact of teenage pregnancy. Because I feel like teenage pregnancy is on the rise, 100%. I know from my year, even though I am 21, a lot of people, while I was still in school, were having children. And I know from one of my best friends who had a child just as we were just before finishing our A levels. She said it impacted her socially, but she also felt well-being, and that was so lonely and stuff like that. So it really stirred me on to look into it. And obviously, doing my literature review, there isn't much out there on it, which has even made me more interested in finding it out. Obviously, at the moment, being an undergraduate student, it would not be ethical for me to go out there and conduct a primary research study. So I am having to rough it out and find some literature on there. So it is really interesting topic, I find.
Yeah, definitely. I think the impact of children, looking after young children on anyone. I know I became a father at 42. It is a big shock. In many ways, it's a lot easier than you think, but in other ways, particularly that feeling of just being tired and also thinking, well, I can't do that thing that I used to do anymore, and changing your view of yourself, it can be very challenging. But I think there's definitely a stigma that goes with like young people as well, and overcoming that. And have you done any studies into, I don't know what your specialisms are in particular, but do you look at, say, genetic, environmental, and trauma-informed studies of mental health?
Yeah, so I actually chose to do a module. So we had this year, we had a chosen module that we could choose. We could either do crime or we could do trauma. And I chose to do trauma as I thought it'd be very much more interesting, and how trauma-informed care is better than other care that can be provided. So I found that really interesting. But also I feel the stigma around children and young people now is because generationally we are very different to 21-year-olds, maybe say 20 years ago. 20 years ago, 20-year-olds were in long-term relationships, getting married, having kids, but now that's not what the 20-year-old generation is sort of doing. We've very much steered away from that, and it's becoming younger as to how old you are. So as a 21-year-old, I do not feel 21. I do not feel prepared to go off into the world and have my own home and have my own family. But I think that's because it's become very hard for that to happen for children and young people at our age. So it's very much harder for us to go out there and make a living for ourselves, which I also think causes some mental health issues, because why try when there's so many barriers in front of you to go for that sort of lifestyle? It's becoming so much harder for people my age to actually grow up.
Definitely. And I listened literally within the last 24 hours, I've listened to a couple of podcasts with Gab and Marte, and I listened to a podcast this morning, Laurie Sanchez, who does the Coursera Wellbeing course. She's a professor at Yale, and she noticed increasing mental health issues with her students a few years ago, so designed a Wellbeing course. And there's just been a report released by the international, I don't know what foundation it is, that looks at happiness and the indicators, and they were doing comparative studies, and they were saying that the housing crisis in some countries, the cost of rent, the cost of getting on the housing ladder, the cost of higher education, the insecurities at work, where the idea of going into a career and maybe staying there for a while is not the same. And people, as you say, young people can't just say, all right, I'm going to leave home and get set up now, because the costs of that, in the midst of a cost of living crisis where energy bills are going up, food prices are going up, council taxes are going up, and people are getting less services for them, like access to counselling and mental health services. It's a very difficult time for young people, particularly in countries like the UK, where we've seen basically things go backwards for quite a few years. And I think it is hard. And I think that the trauma-informed approach to things, it kind of acknowledges how tough it is for everyone, and how even people who think, oh yeah, I'm doing okay, there's a lot in there. Because I was listening to Gabor Mate this morning. He said, if you think about it, we were born and our families looked after us, and there was a wider group that looked after us. And now it's like, right, you're going off to school, you're going off here. Oh, now you need to move out and get a place of your own. And it isn't natural. It isn't natural, this stuff. So we've only been doing it for like 15,000 years, not living as gatherer hunters, sorry. And it's hard. And I think certainly over the last few years, for millennials, etc., Generation Z, it's got even harder compared to the past. And I think that's why we're seeing such an expansion of well-being issues among young people. Have you got any comments on that?
I'm not too sure. So obviously, as a generational thing, mental health is becoming much more prominent in younger people. But I think going back to COVID, it's put a massive strain on services, because mental health is becoming such more prevalent in children and young people. They are having to wait, which is then again making it worse, because people are having to wait. They're not getting the help that they need, which then carries it on until people are older, and then they've missed the child services, and then the adult services become overrun, and it's going to get to a point where there's no availability in any service and no one's going to get any help. So I just think it's a crisis that really needs sorting.
Yeah, I've spoken before on the podcast, when I've spoken to counsellors, that people can see a counsellor once a month or maybe once every 2 weeks if they're doing a course of counselling, and it means that they can, within one particular monthly salary, there's only 1 or 2 classes that you're paying for, which can help people. There's also a lot of organisations out there that can help provide. So I know Hope Street has a counsellor who can provide counselling to people as well, free of charge. And there is a lot of good stuff out there. But as you say, there's a lot of people who they're so busy and they just suppress it. And particularly that old way of like, oh, we don't talk about that, which I think we are moving away from. There's still a lot of like feelings of guilt, like, oh, I'm not that important. Oh, I'm okay. I haven't really got capital T trauma going on in my life. But that builds up, doesn't it? and it manifests it.
Absolutely. And people are like, oh, there's people out there that have it way worse than me. Why should I take time away from those people that really need it when I should be able to deal with my own little things? Because I know I felt like that 100% in my own journey with my well-being. Just, oh, it's just little me. I should be able to deal with these little things that are bothering me. But then you hold on to that, and then it gets worse and worse and worse to a point where you're like, no, actually, other people around me are now saying you need to get some sort of help. That's when it then spurs you on.
I think that's a great point, because when I've had counselling in the past, I knew I needed it. But before I kind of had my difficult time in 2007, before then, like mental health and well-being was just, I didn't know anything about it really. But sometimes I see people and go, that person needs some help, or that person's not okay. And sometimes people don't always see it themselves. And that's why you need that family team around you. And you need to be open with your emotions. And I know a lot of people say women are often better at talking about their emotions, but I think a lot of the time women suppress it more as well, because often women have a lot of responsibilities in different parts of life, which builds up to a lot. Even though you might live in a household where someone who might be a male, who might be called like a modern liberal male, who does their share of various things that might have been once considered women's, where a lot of people still suppress things and don't really acknowledge their own feelings, because ultimately it's a coping mechanism to try and keep going. And that's a problem in itself again, isn't it? That people are so busy that they feel they can't do it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think the stigma around, it's all right. I think the stigma around women, obviously, being a bit more open about their feelings and stuff, is because it's more widely accepted that women are more vulnerable and talk about their feelings a lot more. And the stigma around men talking about their mental health is definitely being more open and accepted, which is really good. But at the same time, there's still that personal stigma that you hold against yourself of like, I'm a man, should I really be talking about this, when it's usually what women do? It's still a very much societal thing, even though it is becoming talked about more. People still hold that prejudice against themselves.
And that's where people are their own worst enemies. But I mean, looking back to before I was 29, there was probably things going on there where I just never had the ability to take a step back and go, what are you doing? Like, what you're doing isn't sustainable. And Gabor Maté alluded to it in his podcast. And for those who are listening, Gabor Maté's like a trauma. He focuses on trauma and the impact of trauma on people's lives. And he said he used to be a GP who was a workaholic, and in many ways he was getting self-esteem from that while neglecting his basic needs, because he was looking for something to keep him happy, or what he thought was happy, while overworking himself and burning a candle at both ends. And I see a lot of me in my 20s, looking back when I first went into teaching. I think that's what I was doing. I threw myself fully into it, almost as this is my thing. And really, I wasn't looking after my basic needs, like getting enough sleep, having me time, those kind of things. And ultimately, if you're not doing that, no one else is going to really do it for you. So I think we need to increase that awareness and get it out there. What pressures have you felt with your studies? Because I know that particularly third year, it was difficult. My third year at university, etc. There's a lot of expectation on young people to like be working now while they're studying, and you've got mobile phones and social media. I think it's a different kettle of fish now than certainly when I went to uni in the 90s. So what do you feel the pressures are on undergrads? Because I know a lot of them struggle when they first move away from home. It can be quite a trigger, can't it, when you're away from your family home for the first time?
So me, I moved away from home. I'm about 2 hours away from my family. I wanted to do that because I like my own sort of I like being responsible for myself. And I really struggle when I go home because I like to plan my own meals, eat when I want, do what I want. And it's nice to have that responsibility. But also during my first year, yes, I was very homesick and I did go home quite often. But I think that's because I'm not your typical average uni student. I don't drink very much. I don't go out partying most nights. So I didn't gel very much with the people that I lived with in first year. We got on and we were friends and stuff, but I never was going out with them or anything like that. I'm not like that. But going with the pressures of uni, I think my experience has been different to others because during my second year of uni, I had a big health crisis where I got really ill and I completely missed the second semester of university. So I actually have 2 modules from my second year of uni that I still need to hand in this year. So I have 2 extra assignments I need to hand in, which has made my third year very, very stressful. And I'm getting through it slowly. But I feel the pressure to do well is heightened. I feel like everybody has this expectation that you need to get first, you need to do very, very well in order for your degree to count. Me personally, I'm like, if I get a 2-2, I'll be so extremely proud of myself that I've got through it and I've done it, because I think I've had so many setbacks that getting there would be amazing. My dissertation supervisor did advise, she go, do you want to push your dissertation to August? And I was like, absolutely not, because that means I will not graduate with my cohort. And I've worked far too hard not to graduate with my cohort. This next month is going to be such a battle of getting up, doing my work, still making time for me, but making sure I get everything done and in on time. I'm excited for it to be over, not because I've not enjoyed my experience, because uni's uni and you find your people at uni. I've definitely found my forever friends, but it's everyone says, oh, uni's this big amazing thing, but nobody talks about how lonely uni is. You can be in a house with like 8 other people and feel the loneliest you've ever felt, because you're literally sat stewing with your emotions, your feelings, and know what, you typically don't really live with people that's on your course unless you choose to move off campus within your second and third year. So you never have that person to sort of guide you with what's going on in your course. So you sort of go away from your lectures and you sort of be like, oh, well, I don't know what to do anymore, don't know what to do now. And I know I felt that quite a bit, the loneliness of being in a crowded place but still feeling like you've got no one. And I think no one talks about that with uni.
Yeah, I read a great book recently by Olivia Lang, I can see it on that shelf, and it's about loneliness. And she said that you can be in New York, the most busy city on the planet, or one of the busiest, and you can feel completely lonely. I went there a few years ago by myself to write a play, and in the end I just did this travel log of like things I saw when I was there, which was quite interesting actually. I really enjoyed like being an observer, an Englishman in New York, as Sting might have said. But she's right, you can be in a really busy place and you feel alone because you're not making those connections and the social media and stuff. Certainly when I went to uni, I found the first few months quite tough, and in second year when we were in halls, tougher again because we were in this house a bit further out. But it took me a while to adjust, but I mean in the end I was devastated when I left uni. I was heartbroken, but it was different times back then. I think millennials and Generation Zers are a bit more health conscious maybe than we were, and again, each to their own. There's going to be people getting up to all kinds at university, and sometimes you're exposed to that. Sometimes you might be a willing participant, and sometimes you're like in between. There's a lot of stuff going on, isn't there? Which is a bit mad while you're young and when it's happening. But it can certainly be very difficult. And I know, speaking to a mental health worker, she said a lot of people can go into crisis when they first go to uni, and it can be quite difficult and can trigger things. But it's certainly something which I think is underreported. Where I know people are a bit more open about these things, but when I was at uni, there was no mental health. Nothing was discussed mental health wise. You had the doctors where you could go. All the students were registered with the doctor, but no one really spoke about mental health. And I think that was very much the way it was back then.
Yeah, I think what's really spoken about on our course is not obviously the lecturers, but the cohort itself always have said you can come to uni and have no mental health problems at all, but by the time you leave uni, you've had an experience with mental health problems. It's just a thing that comes with going to university, and I don't think anyone talks about that. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be spoken about more. That you go to uni and you will obviously have to experience some sort of pressure that will impact on your mental state. It's very much, and you need to find that balance between going full force and doing really well and maintaining your own mental state and making sure you're still healthy. Because I don't think that's very much promoted at uni at all. At the moment, at my uni, it's really well promoted. So we have a very big wellbeing site at uni, and it's so good. And I have accessed it myself, and I am currently on a waiting list to receive counselling through the university. But when I went to get it, there was like, oh, there's about a 3.5 month waiting list. And I was like, oh, okay, there's no point putting me on there because I'm finished in 3.5 months. So it just felt very pointless going. And then someone saying, oh, you should go to your doctor and get some medication. I'm like, I want to stay off because there's such a stigma around medication as well. I didn't want to go down the medication route. I wanted to sort of just talk to someone. That's all I wanted to do, get everything off my chest. Someone to tell me that it's not silly of me to feel like this, even though I know it's not. Obviously, through my course, we get taught all about what mental health is, how to deal with your mental health. But being someone that knows all about it, it does not help or prevent you from having mental health problems yourself. Because I know me, it's so frustrating knowing all about it. And then you're like, what? I can't deal with my own mental health.
Yeah. Well, that's a good time. I think what we'll do, Caitlin, if it's okay with you, we'll have a little break now, and then we'll come back and talk about your personal journey and how what you've learned academically, how you've used that, or how you found it difficult to integrate them both. So is that okay if we just have a little break there and then come back? Cheers.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to part 2. So, Caitlin, tell us about your personal journey. Feel free to talk about whatever you want. And I always say to people as well, while they do these podcasts, folks, that they've got final editing rights over it, that they say. So, Caitlin, when you're ready.
So, when I was about 6, I think it was, I started having really bad health issues, and we found out since that it's Crohn's/ulcerative colitis, which is sort of autoimmune disease. I've had many surgery for that to sort of help. I was on like steroids. I did end up having a stoma for about a year and a half, I think it was, when I was in about year 5, year 6. And then that got removed. Touch wood, I've had no issues with my Crohn's colitis since then. But recently, when I was 19, it was such a random day. I just had my tea, and then I was keeled over in pain. I couldn't move, couldn't sleep. If I moved, I was in agony. And I think I was in agony for about a day and a half, until I finally convinced my mum to ring 111 and be like, Mum, can you please just inquire about what this could be? So I had to go to I think it's like an outpatient sort of like care thing. I can't remember the proper name for it. And I got triaged there, and they took my heart rate, and it was 144. But I was in no like pain in my chest or anything like that. And the nurse sort of just looked at me, and she was like, "Are you like nervous or anything?" And I went, "No, why?" She was like, "Your heart rate's like really high. Like you should probably be having a heart attack right now." And I was like, "What? Really?" She's like, "Yeah." It's like, I can't feel anything. So that was really strange. She went, "You need to go to A&E like right now." So me and my mum drove to A&E, and we were in A&E for quite a while. So they thought originally that I had, what's it called? Your appendix. They thought my appendix had burst. So I went down for like ultrasounds and stuff, but it turned out I had a 12-centimeter cyst on my left ovary that was obviously causing my agony. And I think it was 2 o'clock the Tuesday. So this all started, I think it was on the Sunday. 2 o'clock in the morning, the doctors came in, and did some final checks and was like, we're going to have to remove your ovary. So at the age of 19, I lost my left ovary and my fallopian tube. So that was quite a traumatic experience. Thankfully, I was in a long-term relationship with my boyfriend at that point, and he's been so supportive over it. My mum and my dad have been very supportive, my entire family. But ever since then, I developed such an anxiety around my health, such a procrastination around doing my uni work, because I was like, what is the point in doing my uni work, getting it started, going really well with it, just to be in the same position I was last time where I couldn't complete it all and I got really far behind. And since then, I have been admitted to hospital 2 times, I think it is. So I had cysts on my right ovary, but thankfully they've not got as large as 12 centimetres yet. They said that they usually like to remove cysts at 5 centimetres, but obviously I had no symptoms. And what they think caused my agony and pain is because obviously I've got a sensitive bowel. The cyst got too large and started to irritate my bowel, which caused my symptoms. The bowel was like, whoa, you've gotten too big now, let's get this gone. So that's gone, but I am in constant sort of pain now. I'm on some heavy painkillers daily to sort of deal with that, as I have persistent cysts on my right ovary now, but they don't want to remove that, as when I went for my first surgery on my left ovary, I had every surgeon under the sun you could think of, brain, heart. They said the only surgeon I didn't have in there was to do with my bones, because they said that wouldn't have been affected because it was so high risk. And when they took my left ovary, they said they couldn't even see the right side of my ovary, my right ovary, because of the amount of scar tissue and stuff that's in my abdomen from my young age. So they said it's really dangerous to do any more surgery. So I've sort of just got to wait it out and hope for the best. But my mental health has really gone downhill from there. It's gotten better now. I've had some CBT, but I stopped going out with friends because I was like, I'm in too much pain, I really can't be bothered. I'm just not going to be any fun or anything like that. My studies really took a hit because I wasn't in for the second half of year 2. I still have some of that to do, obviously, as I've mentioned previously. And then the uni have been very supportive with it, but at the same time, they're like, we can't really let you off with it. I did have to really push back, to be fair, to get those to bring through to year 3, because they were trying to get me to resit the entire year. And I was like, I don't want to do that, because not to toot my own horn or anything, the other assignments I've done, I've passed really well. I've done well in them. So I'm not going to do them again, because that's just takes the mick, really. So I was like, it's 2 assignments. I can do them next year. How wrong was I? It's really taken a lot out of me, and I've had to sign quite a lot of paperwork to say that I'm actually going to do them. So it's been a struggle. But like I said earlier, knowing so much about mental health, it didn't help. It made me more frustrated, because I was like, I know so much about what I'm going through, but I'm still in denial that I am going through this. I was very much, I should be able to deal with this. It's literally, I've had an ovary removed. But when I spoke to my CBT therapist, she's like, you're going through a loss, you're grieving. And I was like, what do you mean I'm grieving? I've had surgery, I've lost an ovary. And she's like, exactly, you've lost an ovary. As a 19-year-old, you now have a lesser chance of having children. And I always say to people, I don't want kids. I don't want kids anymore. They're gross, stuff like that. But is that a result of possibly not being able to have kids? Is that my defense mechanism to sort of lessen the blow a little bit? And I get told by my doctors, oh, cysts on your ovary are a common thing at people your age. And I'm like, but I've never heard of anyone going through what I've gone through. So it made me feel quite lonely and like, why has this happened to me? Have I not already been through enough as a young child? So it really got me into a spiral.
Just so while you're having a drink there, so CBT is cognitive behaviour therapy, which is a form of counselling that challenges thoughts and the behaviours that result from those thoughts. And it's very much kind of in the present. What can we do right now to deal with things and improve things in the present? Sorry, please continue.
It's all right. So yes, I did CBT, and I found CBT very helpful in the moment. It helped me get back on my feet. What was helpful for me was being very organised. I've found that from my anxiety and stuff, I've become very a time orientated person, which in hindsight is a good thing, but I get very it's obsessive. I obsess about the time. I feel like time moves very much faster than it does. So say I have to get a train at 1 o'clock, I'll be at the train station from about 11, because I'm going to miss my train. So many things are going to go wrong. I'm going to miss my train. And that's very much started since my health issues. But what I found really helpful was timetabling. My CBT therapist helped me timetable and stuff. And that resulted in me going to conga, which is a gym class that they do at my university. And I go with my flatmate. It's so fun. It's like dance. It's not workout. I do feel like I've worked out afterwards, but you have like really cool pop music on and you're dancing to it, but doing like workout moves. It's very much better for me than going to the gym and going on the treadmill doing weights and stuff, because I find it much more enjoyable. I don't feel like I'm working out, but then I'm getting that valuable time with my friend and it's making me feel better about myself. That's very much what I do every single week religiously, because I'm like, it's time for me. It's just an hour to myself with my friend and it's really nice. I do a lot of like skincare and stuff because I'm like, I need to take care of myself. And that came from CBT as well. But some of the things in CBT didn't help. So they did thought challenging. So where I had my thought, and in that moment, I had to weigh up the pros and cons of that thought, of things that fed into the thought that as to why the thought was rational, and then things as to why the thought wasn't needed, wasn't necessary. And I didn't like that. That didn't work for me because I'm a very much, I'll deal with it later kind of person. I have the thought and feeling, and I'm like, I'll deal with it later. And obviously that's not probably the most efficient way to deal with your thoughts and feelings. But for me, that's what works. And I know that mental health is very much tailored to the individual person. And that's what I've learned from obviously my own mental health problems, that the same thing doesn't work for everybody.
I think CBT and different types of counselling, also your counsellor, the person you're speaking to, sometimes it's just not right, isn't it? You say, well, that doesn't work for me. And other people need to be able to go, yeah, okay, I respect that. And people shouldn't let that necessarily put them off the whole thing, shouldn't they? But you're right there. Sometimes things just don't really work for you.
My CBT therapist was amazing. I got on really well with her. And it made me excited for the next week to roll around when we had a meeting. I only did CBT for 6 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, we did like a relapse prevention thing. And some of it works, some of it doesn't. But I definitely feel I need more support than CBT. I need to get to the root cause of what's happened here. Because I think when I was younger, I went through a lot more than what I remember, because I did end up in the ICU for a while and I was in intensive care. But that's never really, well, I thought it never really affected me until obviously I had my health struggles like 2 years ago. And I think that brought everything trauma-wise from when I was younger right back up for me to deal with now. And you don't expect that to happen. You think, oh, that happened, I can't remember much of it. But I think that was my brain blocking the bad bits out, because I can remember really good bits from when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I wanted to be a nurse, because I was like, I had such great nurses when I was in hospital. I wanted to be that for someone else. And then I got to school, did science, and I was like, oh, not for me. But then obviously my sister growing up with Williams syndrome, which is quite rare, not many people know about it. it's similar to Down syndrome with the learning difficulties and stuff. So growing up with my sister, it made me still want to be there for like vulnerable people and be that sort of helping guide. And sort of with social workers, there's a massive stigma around social workers being the big bad wolf, taking people away. And I don't want to be that. That's not what social workers are there for. And I think I want to be part of the change in that stigma.
That's interesting. And interestingly, I had a bit of my genetic disease. I had a real physical health crisis in 2006, and then a mental health crisis a few months later. And I think that the two parts of the same whole, it's like a double helix. And at the time, I couldn't even work out what it was. It's only you come back later, or you change a certain behaviour and you feel better, and you go, wow, that was obviously impacting the way I felt. It's very hard to break it down into its constituent parts, but it seems for you that at 19, that triggered something physically, which then led to a mental kind of impact in terms of the anxiety, the procrastination, the self-doubt, etc., which led to those obsessive behaviours. So you found CBT helpful to some extent. Were you medicated at this time, or did you use any medication?
I haven't been medicated at all for my mental health problems. That's mainly because I need to get in touch with my doctor. I did get in touch with my doctor at one point, and they realised that I had vitamin D deficiency. So I was sort of experiencing seasonal depression because I was in a very depressive state, and I personally didn't see much of a difference taking vitamin D supplements. I do continue to take supplements now, just so obviously that doesn't happen again, but I didn't see very much of a difference in that sort of medication. But no, I've never been properly medicated for my anxiety or anything like that, but I have been advised by like professionals to seek some sort of medication. And me personally, I don't know if it'd be helpful or not. I'm quite a forgetful person, so medication has never really worked very well for me. I've always had to have my mum there going, Caitlin, you need to take medication. Because when I was younger, I was heavily medicated, like steroids and stuff for my Crohn's colitis. So you'd think I'd be very good with stuff like that, but I'm not. And what's been very strange recently is I've developed a massive fear of needles. I hate needles, even though I've had countless surgeries, countless cannulas, countless encounters with needles. I hate them at the moment. And I think that stems from that anxiety around being ill and that it's just going to get so much worse.
It's funny you should say that, because I had a terrible fear of needles for about 12, 13 years based on an experience. And then I had another experience and dealt with it a lot better, and it just went. But I know it's an irrational fear, but it can be very, very powerful. And it's almost like the needle represents something else. It's like here's the object that you kind of manifest and think about whenever you associate it with, or think about any health issues. But in many ways, I think it's good that you're not feeling that you must be medicated, which is good, because in 2007, I thought, I'm going to need to take something here. And I feel terrible. I felt like I just reached the point where I thought I need to take something. And I think it's good that you can certainly get by day to day without it. And again, if necessary, you can look at those options later. I was interested as well in what you said about, I mean, I know a lot about well-being, but I still have bad times and bad spells and stuff. But I feel like I'm a lot better at dealing with things because I know about mental health. So I have little things that I do to help me. How, because other people say this, don't they? There's a famous book, isn't it, called I Know What I Need to Do, so why don't I do it? I forget who it's by, but what's your theory as to how we don't always apply what we know to our own lives?
I think it's a stubbornness thing. I am very much a stubborn person of like, I know I'm struggling and I know what to do to help me not struggle, but I still have that thing of, oh, I'll be all right. It's fine. I'm here to help others. And it's sort of that thing what you do with your friends anyway. People that need advice give the best advice that they need anyway to someone else. So I could give the exact advice that I need to my best friend, and they go around, oh, why are you not doing it? Oh, I don't know. You need it, not me.
Yeah, that's
And I think that
interesting.
happens a lot.
Yeah, I think that it's so much easier to observe another person and make an observation. And I don't know if you've heard of, I'm a big advocate of Paul Cope, who's been on the podcast. He talks about how we've got lots of multiple personalities all conflicting.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is trying to navigate all these. So it's never one person going, oh, you need to do this. You've got like the different people who are competing within your mind almost to be in charge. But when you look at someone else, you just see a whole, and you can look at the whole, appreciate the whole, and give good advice that we can't always take on ourselves. But I think part of us is that stubbornness, and also an inability to be objective. I mean, I do journaling, and that helps me to be more objective. But in my day-to-day life, because there's that much going on, it's very hard to be to use what we might call metacognition, to think about how you're thinking. I do find the theory of metacognition very useful, the idea of thinking about the way you think, where you can say to yourself, oh, you're in a bad mood today. That's interesting, isn't it? It's so empowering to go, oh, yeah. You're almost taking a step back and trying to find that inner you to reflect on the other you that might be not feeling good at that particular time. But it is interesting how we don't always heed our own advice or use the skills we know to improve our own lives. And I suppose if we all just follow great advice, the world would be a much better place, wouldn't it? But we're complicated. It's just nature's complex, the world's complex, and we're complex.
And I just think it's harder to take yourself out of your own situation and sort of look in on yourself and be like, this is what you are actually struggling with. Because when you're looking at someone else, you can see and they explain what's happened. You can be like, well, this is what's wrong. This is what's wrong. This is how you help. But when something happens to you, you sort of take that, like, oh, that's happened, and throw it to the side. You don't acknowledge that that's actually happened. It takes a lot for our brains to actually acknowledge that that's happened to us. Whereas you can see straight away something's happened to someone else and give that advice. I think it's that separation of, oh, it's actually happened to me. I need to give myself the same advice.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think in terms of evolution, we're not really designed to reflect. We're designed to just survive. And the modern world and the long-term stresses, like stressing over something like sorting out your electricity bill and things like that. It's much easier to just kick the can down the road and try not to think about what's wrong in your own lives, isn't it? It's an interesting thing, which I think needs to be looked at more, why we don't act on our own advice, even when we know. That's tremendous insight. Is there anything else that you want to mention that we haven't looked at? I think we've covered all the key bases.
Yeah, I think so. I think one, obviously you said there about your home electricity bills and stuff. I think stuff like that gives children, young people, because we don't learn about stuff like that in school. I think that definitely needs to be brought down into schools where you learn more about stuff like that. And what I found interesting is obviously through my sister, she goes to a special needs school and they learn about how to handle money, where to put your money, how to budget and stuff. And I think that's something that should be brought into mainstream 110%, because once you leave mainstream school and you're thrusted into the big wide world, it's such a shock. You're like, I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared for this. And that's where you see in adult services, it's spiral of people, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I've not been prepared for this.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I remember being in my second year at uni sorting out the gas and electricity bills, and like phoning them up saying, "Is our readings, we're leaving on this day?" And I thought, no one ever told me about this. Do you know what I mean? But you're right. I think that I was listening this morning in Manchester. It might be to do with the Metro Mayor of Manchester again, Andy Burnham. The teaching life skills, or they're trying to make it more life skills based, the curriculum, where they say, right, here's something that you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot in that. I mean, don't get me started on the education system as a teacher of 25 years, and also someone who did fairly well through the traditional education system. But, you know, that's a whole other podcast in itself.
Yeah.
But Caitlin, thank you very much for your time. Anything else you want to mention?
Thank you for having me.
No worries. I'll press stop in a moment, but just want to say thank you for coming on. Good luck with your dissertation and with your studies and with what you do in the future. And I hope that your anxiety and your physical health settle. And thanks for being open with us and sharing your ideas, and also studying things which will help other people as well. You can see that that's important to you. Best of luck for the future, and thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.